Hello, everyone out there. This is Ken DeSessa from Revelwood. I want to thank you for joining me today. You're going to be muted just to avoid the inevitable dog barking or kids crying or keyboard clicking or whatever it is that you might be doing. But if you do have a question, there is an option in the control section of your screen to go ahead and enter a question, and hopefully I'll see it and hopefully I'll be able to answer it. So how many people who are either embarking on or thinking about embarking on an initiative to bring in an FP&A system really consider how they're going to sell the initiative internally, right? How will they convince others, whether it's the CEO, whether it's the CFO, whether it's the board, whatever your situation is, how are you going to convince people that it's worth it? Well, today I'm going to take you through an exercise that helps finance teams, one, pull together their thoughts on the value they expect to receive from an FP&A system implementation, and two, determine the hard dollar ROI potential of implementing an FP&A system. So just so we're on the same page, when I say FP&A system, I'm talking about those systems that you would use to typically replace Excel processes around budgeting and forecasting, reporting, and analytics, right? So you know, and you can see it on your screen, Revelwood is a Workday Adaptive Planning business partner. So we are focused on implementing that particular adaptive planning solution. But the tool you're going to see me use today was created by Workday. So you're going to see Workday logos and references to adaptive planning, et cetera. However, what I want to stress to you is that the parameters, the metrics used to determine the ROI are all based on third-party studies. They're third-party validated by companies like Gartner, for example. My point being, this is not just something that Workday made up. The data used is generated based on statistics that come from outside of Workday. So I think we all, to a certain extent, intuitively know the value of an FP&A solution, but making the business case and making it real and having it hit home for those who may need to get approval, that's not always easy. So the tool we use today is designed to help you think through the value elements of implementing an FP&A solution as well as calculating that ROI. And in the end of this all, I'm going to show you the output of the tool, which is really a nice comprehensive report. It's a PowerPoint presentation. And the intent here is that anyone can use this type of report to have a discussion with anyone else in the organization regarding how the FP&A system will impact their company in terms of value and what that ROI is expected to be. So I use this tool on a regular basis, and during the process of working with customers as they investigate the software, they often need help with creating that justification for their own internal use. So that's how I use this tool. And really, I enter all those company specifics, right? And then generate output that's specific to them. We're going to be using sort of a made-up company today to go through the exercise, but just know that everything, if you chose to use something like this, would be based on your company specifics. I recently had a CFO of a pharma ask for information to help to present the business case of investing in an FP&A system to their CEO. More often than not, I have leaders of finance that are using this solution with me to go to their CFO or to their board. It's just a great way to get the whole company on board. So again, we're going to use a fictitious company. I think I'm going to try to use what I'll call a middle-of-the-road company and data that I normally see around that type and size of company. So let's go ahead and get going right now. Okay, so here we go. The first thing we need to do is just enter some basic information about our company. So, right here, we're going to pick an industry, right? So the industry is going to impact the margin of the model. So, for example, if I pick financial services, you'll see that my margin down here is at 22.92%. If I went with something like consumer products, it would go down to 13.18%. I'm going to pick IT because I think it's kind of middle, IT services, middle of the road at 16.18%. I think it's just a good middle round. But even so, if your margin was different for the industry that I put in here for you as a company, we could just as easily change it and put it to whatever is realistic for you and your particular margin. I'm going to go ahead and use a $160 million, did I do that right, organization today. Okay, you may be bigger, you may be smaller. Now, based on that $160 million company, if we go over here to the right, we're going to enter the number of core users to the systems. Now, these core users would be the people that are really usually it's the finance people, it's the power users, it's the people that create reports, the people that do data imports, maybe the admins of the system, typically finance people. So I think what I would see for this type of company would typically be 3. It could be 2. It could be 4. I'm going to use 3. It's pretty typical. The smaller the company, typically the smaller the number. The number of contributors here. So this is also in relation to the size of the company. These are the business line people that participate in budgets and forecasts. They maybe use the system for reporting and dashboarding and monitoring their business performance. So they're the business line people, I would generally say. And based on what I see on this one, for a $160 million company, I'm going to use 10 as the number there. Now, I've seen as high as 30 for this type of company. I've seen as small as probably 5. Whoop, I put in 100 there. That's not too good. I've seen as small as 5. So I'm using 10 as a middle ground. All right, let's define our budget cycle. I think 4 months, I consider that to be like a September, October, November, December type of thing. Certainly that could be 3 months, October, November, December. Certainly it could be 6 months for some companies. Again, trying to go with middle ground here. So when we do a forecast, how long does that usually take? I'm going to say for this type of company, we're going to use 5 days to do a forecast, 3 to 4 for a smaller company. Some companies I've seen take up to 14 days. Now, a close to get month-end reporting out. This is always different from person to person, or company to company, I should say. I'm going to use 7 to do a month-end close, so give people a week. Seeing these as high as heck, 3 weeks. What if cycle time? So this is if, and this is all going to go to how much time people spend on the FP&A process, right? That's what this is all going to go to eventually. So when people do a what if analysis, typically we think of it, if they're doing it in Excel, how long would it take for you to basically recopy your models and change things in them to reflect some sort of what if that your CFO might have asked you to do, right? I'm going to go with 3 days to do that. It can get complex depending on how complex your models is. It could be easy for you guys, but I'm going to go with 3 as the general. Annual IT costs associated with the current way of doing business. So I'm going to leave this at 0 right now, assuming that maybe most of the people on this call are using Excel and IT really doesn't have to do much, although they usually get involved with data. But let's just be conservative and go ahead and leave that out for now. Okay, so we've got some parameters set, so let's move on. I mentioned that part of this is about return on investment, the hard dollars, and we're going to see those calculations, but it's also meant to help organize your thoughts around what's most important to you and the business issues you face, so that if you're given a presentation, you can create a complete picture for whoever it is that you're presenting to. So in this section, the customer would select the business issues that are applicable to them. It may be just a few of these, it may be all of them. It depends on the particular company. A lot of time, there is demand from executive management. It doesn't have to be just new management, but executive management for more reporting that you're able to do right now. That's a pretty common one, so let's check that one. Organization growing and finance needing to scale. That's usually one. Accuracy or regulatory compliance. I mean, I see some companies focus on that, but not everyone, so I'm going to go ahead and skip that. Controlling costs is always one that's checked. Continuity planning, strengthening business. Certainly with COVID-19, that was critical on everyone's mind, but let's put aside COVID-19 today. I don't think people were thinking about that much, so I'm just going to leave that blank. And by the way, it doesn't really matter whether you check it or don't check it. It just becomes part of the presentation so you can focus on what's important to you. It doesn't add anything to dollars or anything like that. Data-driven decision-making is usually always checked, and we could always enter something else if we needed to. Okay, so let's move on. Let's look at the top challenges for our business and what's important that we solve when we implement a new system, right? So what you do here in this particular slide is you rank these. I'm going to rank them typically as I see them in a medium-sized company. So finance stuck in low-value tasks, let's face it, that's almost always high, right? It's just they spend so much time managing Excel, it becomes a huge part of the job, and we consider that a low-valuable task. Certainly things that finance people could do that are much more valuable to the organization. Okay, needing to improve engagement and ownership across the business line. Yeah, I would say yes, certainly for some companies, but generally speaking, I see that as a lower challenge for most people. Single source of truth, mostly because often there's multiple versions of Excel and you get data errors. This is usually only felt by the finance team because they do a really great job of making it right before they send it out. So it doesn't always appear to be an organizational challenge, but in reality, it's usually a significant challenge for finance. So let's go ahead and rate that one a medium. Cycle times, listen, it's almost always high. This directly ties to finance productivity, but as important, especially around the close process, monthly forecasting, monthly actuals reporting, this is a critical element. So the faster you can do these things, right? Either close your month, do a forecast, do a what-if analysis, the better you're going to be at course correcting. So, you see those companies that are more than a week or two into the month before they know what happened, and that's high. That's a tough challenge. So we're going to go with high. Data-driven decision-making, again, usually medium to high. Having disparate legacy systems, I'm just going to leave that as none for now. Most people, again, are coming from Excel, but we do find many other companies that are coming from a system that is either a legacy, it's just old, or it's just not working well for them. But we're going to leave that for none for now. And scenario modeling, again, is almost always high as well, and we can enter something else if we chose to. So we've documented some of the business issues, and we've identified our top challenges. The next thing we want to look at is how we would navigate the actual implementation, if you will, of a software should we invest in one, okay? So let's go ahead and talk about that for a couple of minutes. So if we think about our current processes, what we want to do is we want to document what we would consider to be the current scope of what we want to accomplish with a system and what might be a future scope, okay? And keeping in mind that we could modify any of these to change the wording if it was necessary, because it may not be perfect for you. So we're just going to go through here, and again, I'm going to just talk about some of the things I typically see in what I would call a phase one or a current implementation and what people might want to do in the future. So they almost always want to do their annual budgeting. Rolling forecast is very often something that people want to do, but they see it as something to do in the future. Cash flow is almost always current. Capital planning, if you have it, certainly would be something that's easy to implement. Revenue planning is almost always in the beginning, at least in some way, shape, or fashion. Forecasting, a lot of people want to get to forecasting and doing it more often. Variance reporting, that's always there. Other financial reports, depending on what this is, I'm going to put current. They're not always wanting to create board books or reports that go to auditors and stuff right off the bat, but certainly balance sheet, cash flow reports they want to do. What if scenario, long-term strategic planning. A lot of times people are doing some sort of long-term plan, maybe a year out, but doing anything more than that is usually some sort of future phase. So, there's a lot that we can do, and this stuff is pretty straightforward and easy to accomplish in a phase one, quite frankly. you may do balance sheet and cash flow reporting in a phase one, but if I were to change this to balance sheet and cash flow planning, that might become a phase two. So reality is I could go down here. I could put, you know, CS. I could put CS planning here, cash flow planning in there, save it, and then mark that as a future phase. So we can make these align with your priorities for what you do. Okay, so looking at people, and this is going to be who's going to be involved with the software in the beginning and who might be in the future. So certainly most people start with having the FP&A people. That's where we start 95% of the time. Accounting, you know, maybe not ever involved, quite frankly, maybe in the future. Executives and boards, maybe not. HR, that's often one that people are involved in the future. Business managers, so those business line, we always see some of those involved up front. Okay, so just how you might see it. Again, we can add other types of business users like operational people, someone in a manufacturing warehouse where we're going to build out KPIs for it, or, you know, someone in sales where you want to do territory alignment, territory planning. That might be a future phase, those sorts of things. Okay? Now, so what models do we see ourselves building out? What actual models are important for us in the beginning to run and manage our business? Well, we always see workforce in some shape or fashion. We pretty much always see operating expenses being done, and we most always see revenue being done. Again, this can vary, you know, just based on a company. They might do a more detailed model in the future and just do something a little bit easier up front. It just depends on their business. Operational models, you know, we typically will see them in the future. A lot of times we see allocations in the future. Just depends on the number of them and how complex they are. Capacity planning, you know, financial statements, pretty much always current. Capital and pre-plan, again, depending if you do a lot of capital planning, you may or may not include that. Marketing and IT spend, maybe not. We can just put that down in the future. If you do project planning, that might be something you do in the future. It actually might be something you do right in the beginning as well. Matter of fact, I'm talking to a company right now that it's a big company, so they have an entire project management office, and we're building out the models solely for the project management office in the beginning, not necessarily the corporate finance group, so it's a little bit of an interesting one. So again, just getting our thoughts together around a lot of this stuff. Where are we going to get our data from? We're going to get it from the ERP. That is pretty much always there. We may have exchange rates, depending on if we use exchange rates at all. We almost always get some sort of payroll data, at least the annual census to build out the models. So we'll just have to see about that one. But you can bring in data from pretty much any source that you need to. It doesn't have to be a GL. It could be a sales system like Salesforce, right? It could be some sort of operational system that is producing some sort of metrics in your business. It could be another type of HR system. It could be an HR service. At least where adaptive planning is not really limited in terms of where that data comes from. Okay. So moving on. So let's document the most important business outcomes that we want to achieve. Okay, and all we're going to do is select 5 of these, I think, to click on just to highlight them that are really important. So streamlining and standardizing the planning process is always important. Accelerating cycle times, allocating tasks out. Yeah, I'm not reading these all to you. I'm hoping that you're reading them for yourself. I almost always see data accuracy and integrity checked here. And I almost always see cost management checked here. So if we had to narrow it down to 5, this is what I would typically see. But certainly everyone's a little bit different. Okay, moving on. And I know I'm moving quick. I hope that's okay. I know people get anxious to get to the actual hard dollar ROI stuff, which we'll be getting to shortly here. Now let's just really, based on the 5 things that we selected, all this slide does is give you information about the adaptive planning solution itself and the capabilities that the solution brings to solving those particular problems. And what you could do is you can go in here and you could check these on and off to see if you really thought you'd be using these or not using these. For example, I'm not sure why you would take out any of these, quite frankly, but if you did, then it would be reflected in the final report. So all of these different things that we needed to, that we prioritized, this is just information about how adaptive planning could actually help you solve those problems, okay? With workflow, with slicing and dicing data by business segments, doing what-if analysis, etc. Okay, so I'm not going to go through each one of these. I don't think it's necessary for this call right now. Okay. Now, this slide, again, this is informational, but it's kind of an important slide. It really talks about some of the statistics that are relevant to how the ROI is going to be determined, right? I mentioned earlier that this is based on third-party studies. So as you can see, there's often significant improvement in the productivity of people, 30 to 50% productivity improvement for core planners. Basically, we're moving people away from non-value added tasks like loading data into Excel and allowing them to focus more time on meaningful tasks that help the business. And each one of these has customer success stories that would be part of the final presentation that we're going to look at later. Okay, so you have a sense for other organizations and what they've achieved. Think about reducing your planning cycles by 50 to 70%. Okay, whether it be a forecast, a month-end closing, an annual budget. I mean, not only does that contribute to productivity of yourself as a finance person and others, but getting information faster allows executives and really business line managers to make decisions faster, to make course corrections sooner. Okay. The other categories: single source of truth, visibility into data, frequency of forecasting, what-if analysis. That all translates into that common theme of productivity and better management. If you can collaborate more, you're going to get a better result. If you can forecast more frequently, you're going to be able to course correct faster. I think what customers most appreciate about Workday Adaptive Planning, that the solution itself, is the ability to quickly and easily do those type of what-if analysis. It takes about 60 seconds to create a full copy of your plan and to begin to create your what-if. So it's really quick. And if you choose to, through security, everyone has immediate access to it and can immediately contribute to it. So it's really sort of a great part of the solution. And by the way, I'm going to send everyone that's attended a copy of the presentation at the end that shows how all this stuff is pulled together. So you're going to get all this kind of stuff. So you don't have to, I hope you're not jotting down notes furiously. Okay, so now we get to the hard numbers. So this is a summary page of all the hard dollar ROI information. It's divided, as you can see, into categories: finance productivity, business user productivity, IT cost savings, cost management, increased revenue, and future higher cost avoidance. We're going to explore each one of these in more detail and make adjustments to reflect the business that we've kind of outlining here. Okay, so let's look at finance productivity first. It's probably not a surprise that anyone that a significant amount of finance time can be spent on low-value tasks, right? Manual process is a major hurdle for companies. So those long cycle times and the use of important finance resources on unnecessary tasks is a big problem. So as we go into the actual numbers, let's keep in mind that finance spends as much as 75% of its time gathering data and administering process. And a lot of that process is non-standard. Recent benchmarks showed that companies take on average more than 12 days to create a forecast. Now, you remember going back in our model, we used 5 days. So we were pretty conservative with that because a study showed 12 days. Okay? And all these different categories, by the way, will follow the same format. They give you some statistics. They talk a little bit about how Workday Adaptive Planning helps, and then we adjust the numbers and we see the final numbers. So as far as finance productivity, Adaptive Planning helps with this by really automating things like the ingestion of data and providing you capabilities like Office Connect, which connects your data in the solution to Excel, PowerPoint, and Word, so that documents that you create can instantly update without you having to do anything, right? And it gets updated with that recent data. The bottom line is that finance experts really can reallocate their time to things like reducing risks of decision-making, et cetera. So here is the saving calculation based on finance productivity. Everything is divided into conservative, a likely, and an aggressive view. We can change the fully burdened cost. So this 3 came from the statistic that we did earlier. We can change the fully burdened cost of an FP&A resource if we chose to do that. Keeping in mind that this is a fully burdened number, and it's kind of that average cost across an entire team. Obviously, some people will be lower, maybe some people are higher, depending on where your company's located, et cetera. We can change that. We can adjust the savings opportunity based on your specific circumstances as well. Remember, the statistic tells us that FP&A spends 75% of their time on unproductive tasks. So with a lot of time administering process and in forecast cycles, this is an important number. So these defaults are usually pretty good numbers, but just for the sake of today, we're going to be a little even more conservative. I'm going to take this and reduce that to 20%, okay? And I'm going to take this and reduce it to 40%. So remembering that our number was 75%, our statistic, this seems fairly conservative. Okay, so let's close this one out. And you can see right now that our finance productivity number is $184,000. Okay, so now let's explore business user productivity. So I think there's an obvious benefit to putting reporting and analytics in the hands of the end user so they can better manage the business. 59% of companies cite business accountability as a problem. Other companies reported that people spent 40% of their time creating reports and a small percentage of time communicating through and within the business. So according to Accenture, smart financial reporting is about making it easy for people to consume and making it real time. And I think Adaptive Planning does a great job with that. It's very intuitive. You know, if you attend a demo of Adaptive Planning, it's very intuitive for finance and business users. It gives you easy drill down features, for example. It gives you a very granular view of your data. And we know and understand that seeing the numbers is one thing, but being able to easily interrogate those numbers and really determine root cause is critical, and Workday is really exceptional at that. Okay, so let's take a look at these particular numbers. We said we would use 10 business users back on our initial screen as our benchmark for this company. So just like before, we take a fully burdened average cost. Now, we have to figure that business users don't spend nearly the amount of time on planning and reporting as finance does, right? So the model defaults to 3.5% of their time. But let's, again, be even a little bit more conservative. Let's go with 2.5% as a pretty good number. So just so you know, that's around 50 hours a year. So only about 4 hours a month for a business user in report generation, forecasting, whatever it is that they do in the FP&A process to work with you. It comes out to about 4 hours a year. So I think that's pretty, a month, I apologize. So I think that's pretty reasonable. Again, we have this conservative, likely, and aggressive scenario on how we're going to, how much of that we're actually going to achieve. So again, let's go down to 20% and 40% just to make these numbers a little bit more conservative than what comes standard with the model. So as we close that one out, we see we have, close to a $14,000 gain there. Now, we didn't include any IT costs, but this is certainly maybe part of your equation as I mentioned earlier on, but let's just go ahead and, I'll click on it and I'll go into it, but we're not going to spend really any time changing these numbers, right? So if you had a cost and you kind of could estimate it, we would put that cost in here, and then we would identify how much we might think we're going to save on that. So if you think if your IT is heavily involved in data, getting the data to you every month, and we can create an automated integration, right? That might be a significant savings. Okay, but for purposes here, we're just going to leave that at 0 right now. Okay, so let's explore cost management. Studies show that there's a definite relationship between cost and cost to unsound decisions, and the cost to that decision making, right? And the misuse of information. So Gartner estimates that companies lose up to 3% of their profits due to unsound decision making. And also revenue can be impacted by as much as 1%. So there's definitely this link between the use of data and informed decisions. The capability to create accurate and informative analysis and understand actual performance, both from a revenue and profit perspective, is important. The Workday Adaptive solution is going to help you better access that data, improve your analysis and forecast, both from an accuracy perspective and a timing perspective, right? It's going to give you more visibility. There's certainly other benefits like that engagement with business users and accountability, et cetera. But what I see customers really appreciating is how fast you can do the things like what-if scenarios and the things like generating a forecast and closing the books. That's really where I see a whole lot of appreciation by customers. So let's go ahead and look at these numbers. So what we see is a calculation of operating expense based on the margin that we apply to our business. So with a 16% margin on $160 million, we can see our operating expenses are our margin is $134 million, or our operating expense is $134 million. Okay, so it's in our likely scenario, what we're estimating here is just an improvement of 0.1% on our expenses, right? Remember, Gartner showed a study that said that as much as 3% impact on our costs, right? So we're going to be super conservative with this. Okay, and we're going to lower that to, let's say, I want to make sure I get the right number. I knew I had it lowered. So let's just lower this to, this is really low, 0.1% to 1%. So we're just going to lower this to 0.4. And we're going to lower this to 0.09. So we're just going to lower it a little bit because those were already super conservative. I thought I had changed them back up earlier on, but I didn't. So we're just going to leave that right there, and it gives us a pretty conservative view. Okay. The next thing we're going to look at is increased revenue. Okay. Studies have shown that there's a link between lost revenue and decision making based on old or inaccurate financial analysis. Remember, it was that 1%. So the case for this really revolves around the use of planning to understand where to put your company resources to maximize revenue and also, of course, profit, but in this case, we're talking about revenue. But being able to use driver-based forecasts makes it really easy to create alternate scenarios that aid in decision-making. And the technology allows you to break down the data in many ways so you always have the best possible view, one of the powers of adaptive planning. So as we look at this scenario, we're increasing our revenue by 0.07% in our likely, which is right here. We're going to change that to 0.05%. This is the one I knew we were going to change. Just to be a little bit more conservative, okay? And that, what we're going to do is it's going to then calculate the margin on that that new revenue based on our operating margin percent for the particular industry. So it's basically just increasing, it's just applying additional revenue based on that additional margin that's being calculated here, okay? And I also think we can reduce this by a little bit in our conservative view, so we can do that, okay? I hope everyone sees that. We calculate margin on new revenue, and that gives us the additional increase, okay? And that's added into the whole ROI. Okay, as you can see, we just added about $12,000 a year into it, a little over $12,000 a year. Okay, so our last category is future cost avoidance. And it's an important element to the ROI. And even though you may not have a hiring requisition out right now, certainly if you're a growing company, your reality is that you really should consider this. There seems to be an ever-increasing demand for flexible and timely reporting by executives, right? Boards, even business line people. This is often in response to business growth and increasing complexity in managing the business and responding to those changing environments. So you also throw in special initiatives, you throw in mergers, and a lot of times organizations are having to hire additional finance people. And what we hope to do is be able to reduce your need in that area. A Workday Adaptive Planning really allows you to do things so much quicker, right? Instantaneous aggregation and availability of data, that's critical. Movement of data becomes really just second nature and easy to do as you go from your source system into the adaptive planning environment. Just reduces tasks to minutes, right? If you're investigating data, doing root cause analysis, all those things, you can do so much faster and so much easier that you really extend that time you need before you need to hire additional people. So as you can see here, we accounted for one new staff member at a much lower fully burdened cost than we did when we were looking at the finance team on average. I'm just thinking that you would hire, a more junior person in that regard. Most people I talk to think this is a reasonable assumption, but again, we can change this to something that you might want to do, like say our conservative is 0.5, our likely is 1. Whatever we want to do there, whatever makes sense for your organization, we can do and leave it at that. Okay, so we're finished with all our different categories here right now. So here what we're seeing is the total projected benefits over 3 years. There we go. Okay, keeping in mind that these projected benefits are not something I'm making up. They're based on those third-party statistics. For any individual company, they may realize the benefits, differently, and so we can modify these things to reflect what you think you might do as an organization. We can look at a 3-year or 5-year window. Here we're looking at the likely scenario, but we can change that and look at the other scenarios if possible. When we look at these, we typically don't realize all the benefits at once. So year one, you're not going to realize all these benefits. It takes time to get used to the system. You may be rolling out the system in phases, etc. So we can enter in whatever you feel makes sense for you in terms of how you're going to realize the benefit. Here we have 50% realization of the benefit in year 1, 75% in year 2, and then 100% in year 3. That's pretty typical. I think that's fair. Again, we can always change that. The last piece we do have to do, though, is enter our investment, because we've talked about benefits, but we also have an investment that we're going to make. Based on the number of users we came up earlier, which was 10 business users, 3 finance users, I think a better annual estimate for the subscription would be maybe $65,000. And it just, again, moves this number up a little bit because I want to try to be a little bit on the conservative side with all this. Having done this many, many times in terms of project implementations, it doesn't usually cost that much. It just doesn't. Whoops. it's usually, most projects fall in that $45,000 range, especially for a $160 million company. So I think that's reasonable just to put that down. Of course, that is a one-time implementation, so that's why I'm only showing it in year one. With your annual subscription, you're gonna see that in multiple years. Okay, so as we get into that, as we submit it, here is a summary on the total ROI. As you can see, the discount rate we use to calculate our net present value is 10%. I think that's a good number to use. We can also adjust that discount rate if you think it's appropriate, but whatever you're comfortable with. As you can see, we've got about a 300% ROI with a payback in under 6 months. Okay? And that is the calculation of ROI. Now, we still have a few more things. If we consider this as a whole and we want to do a presentation to our constituents in our business, there's another thing besides this that we can add, and that's success stories. We include things related to your industry, typically. So here at HireVue, for this particular industry, you can see, and if you read that real quick, they were able to really focus on continuous planning. If you look at HubSpot, they decreased their cycles by 15 to 20%, which I think is really great. So these are stories you can share with your customer. You can also, if you're sort of in multiple industries, we can always pick another industry like manufacturing, and then we would include a whole bunch of those stories. If you look at the story like of Zag, they were actually cost management. Talk about cost management. They saved $8 million by fixing a freight issue they found through the adaptive planning solution. These are all great stories you can use to kind of sell how other people are using it and how they benefit from it. Okay, so from here, we would generate your personalized and customized report, and I'm going to go into that now, and we're really wrapping things up here. Okay, so this is a comprehensive report that you can use in any way you'd like. I think the thing I can't stress enough is that when you're making the case for an FP&A system, the hard dollars are important at ROI, but often just as important is helping people understand that you've been thoughtful in why you need an understanding and thoughtful in how it would impact the company and what you would get out of the system and how you want to go about it. So I think that's an important part of it, and it helps make an exceptional business case. So the report looks something like this. I'm just going to thumb through it. It's 40 plus pages, so we're definitely not going through it all, right? Pretty extensive. So I'm just going to sort of thumb through this, and we'll stop at certain slides just to kind of point them out. Like slide 3 is a summary of the challenges that you face, right? This slide here, slide 5, I think it is, points out is a summary of the ROI slide. Okay. Here are some, we get into challenges and third-party statistics about, and you've seen all this, right? This is all in the other thing. And you can just see how what we've taken from there and now we've put it into a report. We talked about long cycle times, data integrity issues. All this context is coming from what you would have selected within the process that we just went through. We get into specifics about your journey. Okay, so then we get more into the hard dollar ROI. We talk about our benefits. We talk about our investment. And then we really move into a deeper dive into each of those areas that we looked at when we went in and calculated our hard dollar ROI. And in the presentation, it follows a pretty similar format. It gives a benefit of the summary. So this is about finance productivity. It gives you some statistics. It gives you what your future state might look like. And it gives you the ROI breakdown along with some customer stories in that particular area. And again, business user productivity, cost management, And you might recognize all of these because we created these earlier on. Increased revenues, future cost avoidance. And then in the appendix, we include a whole bunch of those stories from customers so you can have them on hand and you can talk about what other customers are doing with Workday Adaptive Planning. All right, so that about wraps it up today. I hope you found it valuable. So if you attended, I'm going to be sending you out a copy of this presentation so you can look at it, you can refer to it. It's pretty great. The second thing, if you want to take advantage of this type of thing personally for your company, feel free to reach out to me. I can step you through it, right? My contact is on the screen. Of course, you'll get that when I send you the presentation. And finally, next week on June 24th, so that's Thursday at 4 o'clock, I'm going to be doing an introductory demonstration of the Workday Adaptive Planning tool. So you'll be able to see the solution that sort of inspired all of this. So I'm also going to send you an invite for that particular webinar. It's 45 minutes. I move pretty quick, but it's a great introduction. You're not going to see everything, but it's a great introduction to the solution. You'll see all what I consider to be the key features of the solution that people use sort of every day. All right, so that wraps it up. I believe I'm almost right on time considering we started 2 minutes late. I want to thank you for attending. I appreciate your attention, and I look forward to maybe talking with some of you folks down the road here at some point in time. Take care, everyone.